It's September 1932. The GB-R1 racer is wheeled out of its hangar at the National Air Races at Cleveland, Ohio. Its 800-horsepower engine is fired up. Legendary pilot Jimmy Doolittle taxis it out for the qualifying round. In just a few minutes, Doolittle will have broken the world speed record, but he still has to fly this incredible machine in a race and stay alive. The Smithsonian Institution's National Air and Space Museum is the most visited museum in the world. Its collection contains some of the most important aircraft and spacecraft in history. Craft that were designed, built, and flown by men and women who have expanded the frontiers of flight. This is the Curtiss R3C2. In 1925, Jimmy Doolittle won the Schneider Trophy, an international speed event, in this aircraft. Wiley Post flew his Lockheed Vega Winnie Mae around the world twice in the early 30s and set altitude and speed records in it. Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic in this Vega. 3 months later, she flew the same plane solo across America. This is Buster, an extraordinary little racing plane that started its career in 1932 and competed successfully until 1954. In 1935, Howard Hughes flew his beautiful H1 to a world speed record, and in 1937 made a record flight across the American continent. In the golden age from the late 20s to the late 30s, enormous advances were made in the speed, altitude, and distance capability of airplanes. Competition for prizes like the Bendix Trophy was intense. This is the story of some of the record-breaking planes of the 20s and 30s and the men and women who flew them. Steve Wittmann was born in April 1904. He is one of the greatest racing pilots of all time. This little tailwind airplane is his own design. He built it in 1954. In his late 80s, Steve Wittmann demonstrates the skill and courage that took him to the top level of air racing when it was a great national sport in the 1930s.
There was a race in Milwaukee in 1926, and known as the Air and Water Regatta. I went in it, and there's only 2 times in my life in racing that I tied for a position. And I tied for second in that race, seconds. So we split second and third prize money and called it a tie. Hell, I had to live, and I liked hamburgers, or, something to eat. And they didn't pay a lot, but in those days, a little was a lot.
Steve Wittmann's hero was Jimmy Doolittle. Wittmann saw him in the 1920s testing a Curtiss twisted slab propeller. The engineers were afraid the propeller would break at the hub in a dive.
So he was assigned to take it on up and dive it straight down because somebody, well, wide open, and see whether it would stay together, and it didn't. And when it went, it also took the terrific vibration, took the wings, and so he was up there riding a fuselage down at about terminal velocity. And so he had to get out. And next day he was flying again, and I thought, boy, what a man.
In 1925, the U.S. Army and Navy each ordered high-speed racing biplanes from the Curtiss Airplane and Motor Company in New York. The object was to compete for the Pulitzer Trophy, a race for land planes, and the Schneider Trophy, a race for seaplanes, using aircraft of virtually the same design. This is the Army's R3C-2, the floatplane version. The same plane, fitted with normal landing gear, competed for the Pulitzer Trophy in early October 1925 and won. In that form, it was called the R3C-1. It was an extraordinary airplane. One innovative feature was the radiator incorporated into the wings for cooling the 610 horsepower engine. After the win in the Pulitzer Trophy, the airplane was fitted with floats. Redesignated R3C-2, it was prepared to compete in the Schneider Cup race at Baltimore on October 25th. Its pilot was Lieutenant Jimmy Doolittle. The Schneider Cup had not been held for 2 years. This year, 1925, the U.S. Army faced formidable opposition, most notably from Britain, with a high-performance monoplane called the Supermarine S-4. The little Curtiss racer already had an impressive track record, but it hadn't been tested against international competition. In the Schneider Cup, it would be competing against the British Gloucester Napier and the Italian Macchi flying boats. Unfortunately, the R3C-2's hottest competition, the Supermarine S-4, crashed in practice the day before the race and sank in the Chesapeake Bay. With the S-4 out of the way, there was no doubt about the outcome of the race. The R3C-2 won at an average speed of 232.5 miles an hour. Then, for good measure, Doolittle set a world speed record for seaplanes of better than 245 miles an hour. America was in love with air racing. It was the golden age.
Of course, the big race was the National Air Race. The Henderson brothers put on quite a show. And it was a well-run, tight ship, as they say.
I look back on it now, and I have to say that great credit should be given to one man in particular, old Cliff Henderson, for his love and belief in aviation and the importance of aviation to the military and aviation in general. And he kept that thing alive and pulled in the Thompson people and the Bendix and others to put up the money for these races and to encourage pilots and people that had money to build these racing planes, which they did.
The first Thompson Trophy race was won by Speed Holman in Chicago in 1930. It was sponsored by Charles E. Thompson of the Cleveland company Thompson Products Incorporated and was sanctioned by the National Aeronautic Association to encourage the development of faster land-based aircraft. In 1930, the total prize money was $10,000. By 1938, it had reached $45,000, with almost half that amount and the trophy going to the winner. In 1931, another major trophy event was added to air racing. It was sponsored by the Bendix Aviation Corporation and was described as a free-for-all transcontinental speed dash from Los Angeles, California to Cleveland, Ohio. Although not quite as rich as the Thompson, it was still worth winning. The races for the Bendix and Thompson trophies became the focus of American air racing throughout the 1930s. They attracted a colorful group of competitors, among them Roscoe Turner and the lion he named after one of his sponsors, Gilmore. But some of the greatest records of the 1930s weren't set in air races. This is the Lockheed Vega Winnie Mae. In 1930, it won the forerunner of the Bendix Trophy race from Los Angeles to Chicago. It was owned by F.C. Hall and named after his daughter. Hall hired a one-eyed pilot, Wiley Post, to fly for him. Its fame was really established in June 1931, when Post took off from New York to fly around the world in record time. He made it with 14 stops in 8 days, 15 hours, and 51 minutes. In recognition of the achievement, F.C. Hall presented the Winnie Mae to Post as a gift. On that trip, Post was accompanied by his navigator, Australian Harold Gatty. This is Buster, one of the most successful racing airplanes of all time. It hangs in the Air and Space Museum, looking the way it did when it retired from competition in 1954. But in its original form, it was a product of the golden age of air racing, the work of designer and racing pilot Steve Wittmann.
I went to Oshkosh in 31, March of 31. And in April, I started building first racing airplane. And in end of August, I was at Cleveland racing it.
Its original name was Chief Oshkosh, and back in 1931, it looked very different. Steve Wittmann had firm ideas about the design of racing airplanes.
I really kept it as light as I possibly could, even though I knew I could get more efficiency. Otherwise, I want to keep it light so that I get the first pylon first, and therefore it's a lot safer. And if you have a lead, you have a few miles an hour advantage. Of course, just try and get by somebody, you've got to have a couple miles an hour to do it.
Wittmann had extraordinary success with Chief Oshkosh in class racing all around America throughout the 1930s. By 1936, he'd reduced its wingspan to 13 feet. Wittmann had to crash land the Chief at the Oakland races in 1938, and it didn't compete again until 1947, when it re-emerged with a new name, flying in midget class races with great success until it retired in 1954. This is a Lockheed Vega 5B, manufactured in December 1928 at the Lockheed Burbank plant in California. In 1932, it was being used as a demonstrator by the Lockheed Company when a young woman called Amelia Earhart bought it. Even before Wiley Post's round-the-world flight in 1931, the Lockheed Vega had a reputation as a strong and efficient airplane. It was designed in 1927 by Jack Northrop, who was working for Lockheed at the time. Northrop was obsessed with the idea of efficient airplanes. He gave the Vega a strong, streamlined, tapered fuselage and a cantilever wing without need for struts or wires. Already in 1928, Amelia Earhart had flown the Atlantic, but as a passenger rather than a pilot. She was determined to make the journey again, but this time at the controls of her own airplane. She was sure the Lockheed Vega was the right choice for her attempt. Amelia flew the Vega east and began preparations for the transatlantic crossing. They would take much longer than she anticipated. She hated publicity for her flights and encouraged the rumor that her technical advisor was planning his own Antarctic expedition in the Vega. But in May 1932, she flew to Harbor Grace, Newfoundland, the departure point for her lone journey across the Atlantic.
Yeah, what's this?
It had taken her 2 years to get ready for the transatlantic attempt. 6 months after she bought the Vega, she was returning from a test flight when a latch on her backrest collapsed on a landing. She lost control, and the airplane nosed over, causing damage that took almost a year to repair. In fact, the whole fuselage had to be replaced. Once the Vega was back in one piece, there was a program of modifications to fit it out for the transatlantic crossing. The fuselage was strengthened to support extra fuel tanks. The Vega would need to carry 420 gallons of fuel to keep the Pratt & Whitney Wasp radial engine running throughout the 2,000-mile flight from Newfoundland to Ireland. Filling the tanks with hand pumps was a slow job. The inhabitants of Harbor Grace waited for takeoff preparations to be completed. It was May 20th, 1932, 5 years to the day after Charles Lindbergh's flight to Paris. Amelia Earhart was about to attempt to become the first woman to fly non-stop across the Atlantic. Immediately, the North Atlantic weather was a problem. At one point, the Vega's wings iced up, and Amelia struggled to pull it out of a long descent that at first she couldn't control. She fought fatigue all the way, but managed to remain awake for the 14 hours and 54 minutes it took to reach Londonderry in Northern Ireland. Amelia Earhart landed her Vega in a field near the village of Comore, much to the delight of the locals, who seemed to be more interested in the camera than the Vega or its celebrated pilot. When she returned to America, she immediately planned to become the first woman to fly non-stop across the continent. She succeeded just 3 months after her transatlantic flight. On August 25th, she arrived at Newark, New Jersey, having flown direct from Los Angeles. In spite of her distaste for publicity, Amelia was subjected to the obligatory post-flight interview.
Well, it's 19 hours and a few minutes. I don't know exactly how many. I estimated that it would take me 19 hours and 9 minutes. I think I must have hit it pretty correctly.
And what did you carry on the trip?
You mean to eat?
Yeah, to eat and drink.
Well, I carried some water, of course, because my cockpit is very warm. And I carried a sandwich in case. I didn't eat it, though. I carried some hot chocolate and the old reliable tomato juice.
What kind of a sandwich was it?
Chicken sandwich.
Just over a week after Amelia Earhart arrived in New Jersey, a brand new Granville GB R1 racer was rolled out of a hangar at the Cleveland Air Races for the qualifying runs of the Thompson Trophy. Attempting to control the 800 horsepower monster around the Thompson course would be Jimmy Doolittle, whose own Laird Super Solution biplane was out of action with landing gear problems.
The high speed is expected to be in the vicinity of 300 miles an hour. The landing speed about 90. In spite of the high speed range and the high speed of the plane, it handles very well in the air and on the ground. The barographs have been installed, and in the next few minutes we expect to make an attempt on the world speed record.
There was a bonus prize of $1,575 for the fastest Thompson qualifier. Doolittle didn't disappoint the big Cleveland crowd. His qualifying speed of 294.38 miles an hour smashed the world land plane speed record that stood since 1924. There was another GB entered in the Thompson Trophy race in 1932. It was the GB R2, almost identical with the R1 in appearance, but fitted with a Pratt & Whitney Wasp Jr., delivering about 250 horsepower less than the R1's 800. This is a replica of the GB-R2, exactly as it appeared when Lee Gelbach flew it at Cleveland in 1932. The replica, built by Delmar Benjamin of Wyoming, flew for the first time in late 1991, just under 60 years later. The big GBs made their racing debut in 1931, and from the beginning their performance was startling.
Clear!
Lowell Bales won the 1931 Thompson Trophy in a GB Model Z, but was killed when it crashed while he was trying to set a new land plane speed record. In flying his replica GB-R2, Delmar Benjamin is aware of its reputation as one of the most dangerous airplanes ever built. But it's also one of the most exhilarating to fly, as Delmar discovered when he took off for the first time on December 23, 1991. On that first flight, Delmar established that in spite of its ungainly appearance, the GB will do surprising things. But at Cleveland in 1932, Jimmy Doolittle and Lee Gelbach weren't interested in the GB's aerobatic qualities. They were looking for pure speed around the Thompson Trophy course. The planes were sent off at 10-second intervals, and there was never any doubt about the outcome. Doolittle in the GB-R1 lapped everybody in the field except Jimmy Waddell. Lee Gelbach in the R2 came in fifth, averaging 30 miles an hour less than Doolittle's winning 252 miles an hour. Doolittle marked his victory with a low pass at full throttle across the finish line. Cash prize for the winner was $4,500. With the $1,500 he picked up as fastest qualifier, he made $6,000 in 2 days. Quite a sum in Depression America. Jimmy Doolittle was presented with the winner's wreath and was joined by the race sponsor, Charles E. Thompson, and his wife. In those days, on-camera interviewers could be even more direct than they are now.
How about the sponsor of the Thompson Trophy saying hello to the world?
Oh, wait a while.
All right, hurry up. Well, this is the passing news. Say hello to him, Jimmy, will you please?
Just told the world hello.
Tell him again. You ain't ashamed of it, are you?
1933 was a mixed year for Roscoe Turner at the National Air Races. In the Bendix Trophy, which started from Floyd Bennett Field in New York, his major opponents were the GBs. But the R1 crashed and the R2 withdrew. Turner landed in Los Angeles the winner, setting a new coast-to-coast record of 11.5 hours. Turner finished first in the Thompson Trophy, but was disqualified on a technicality. The National Air Races weren't just about racing. There were many demonstrations of showmanship and flying skill, like this display of aerobatics by German pilot Ernst Udet. Odette performed stunts under power and then cut the engine, showing the crowd some amazing dead stick maneuvers. He finished the routine with a neat side slip and a precision dead stick landing. In 1934, Roscoe Turner boosted the power of his Waddell Williams to almost 1,000 horsepower. He had to withdraw from the Bendix Trophy because of a fuel leak, but broke the transcontinental record anyway. In the Thompson Trophy, Turner's main rival was Doug Davis in another Waddell Williams. Davis was leading when he crashed and was killed. This is Harold Newman in his Howard Ike. After Davis's accident, there was no one left in the race who could challenge Roscoe Turner. When Turner landed in his Waddell Williams, he had won the Thompson Trophy. The loss of Davis's life was felt by all the competitors, and when Turner accepted the Thompson Trophy, there was no trace of his normal big smile and showmanship.
It's a pleasure, not for the fact of just winning the trophy, but the fact that we're making progress in the science of aviation. Because there's only one reason for an airplane, and that is speed. And that's why that I am interested in speed, is so that we can advance our relationship with our fellow man.
In 1935, Steve Wittmann arrived in Cleveland with a new machine he called Bonzo. It was a serious contender for the Thompson Trophy, and Wittmann liked to please the big crowds.
At Cleveland, boy, they sure had crowds. I don't ever remember seeing anything any bigger. Maybe I did get down to, along about that time, to Indianapolis, the car race, and I think they had more there. But we sure packed them in at Cleveland.
The big Cleveland crowds flocked in to see spectacular high-tech machinery operating at its limit and to watch the flamboyant and competitive racing pilots. It was amazing that Steve Wittmann was a pilot at all. He came from a family that he described as being as poor as church mice, and as a young man believed that bad vision in one eye would prevent him flying. But by the middle 30s, he was an established member of an elite group of sporting heroes.
Yeah, we were it. Yeah. And of course, it was something so novel at that time. Just to fly was pretty much of a novelty, and to be racing anyway was really quite something.
I think they were comparable, maybe not exactly the same as the real top sport heroes, but very close, because it was headline news when Jimmy Doolittle set a new speed record, or the Bendix and the Thompson races were reported just on the front page, not on the back or anything. They were major news stories.
Most of the fellows were very competitive. You found a few that would give away, and I was probably not quite as competitive as some, because I felt, well, yes, I want to win this race, but what I want a lot more is to be here for the next one.
In the years between 1931 and 1935, Wiley Post continued to fly Winnie Mae to new distance and altitude records. In 1933, he made a solo flight around the world, faster than his 1931 flight. Then he modified Winnie Mae to attempt flights at extreme altitudes. Post realized that low atmospheric pressure at the altitudes he wanted to reach made some kind of artificial pressure system necessary. Because of the design of the Vega, it was not possible to consider pressurizing the fuselage or the cabin. Post approached the B.F. Goodrich Company and convinced it to help him develop a pressure suit that he could wear inside the cockpit on his high-altitude flights. This is the first suit, developed in June 1934. Later versions were more refined. The third model had 3 layers with long underwear close to the skin, a black rubber air pressure bladder, and an outer contoured layer of cloth. The pressure helmet was bolted onto the suit. Post could seal a removable faceplate when he reached an altitude of 17,000 feet. The helmet had an oxygen breathing system supplied from a vacuum liquid oxygen container. The same container supplied oxygen for suit pressurization. The suit was an important breakthrough and was the forerunner of pressure suits used on manned space flights. The Winnie Mae was modified to operate efficiently at altitudes up to 50,000 feet. The 500 horsepower Pratt & Whitney Wasp engine was fitted with a supercharger. As Post's target altitudes became higher, Winnie Mae's landing gear was modified so that it could be removed and replaced by a tubular steel assembly that could be jettisoned after takeoff. This eliminated the weight and drag of the fixed landing gear. The belly of the Winnie Mae was fitted with a reinforced landing skid. On one of these flights, Post ran into unexpected problems.
Shortly after takeoff, his engine began to spew oil. And somebody had sabotaged the supercharger on the airplane. They'd poured some emery dust in there. He knew he had to get down in a hurry. He was aware of the existence of the lake bed. And fortunately, just after dawn, he was able to bring it in for a dead stick landing. Perfect landing, in fact. So silent that Charlie Anderson, who ran the Muroc General Store, didn't even hear the landing. And Wiley Post was wearing this early pressure suit, which looked like a diver's suit. And he got out of the airplane and he walked over across the lake bed to Charlie Anderson, tapped him on the shoulder, and Charlie Anderson nearly fell dead, fainted. Thought he'd seen a creature from space.
Wiley Post, although his 2 round-the-world flights got him the name and the publicity, and they were important in a sense, the high-altitude work he did was much more important. He really pioneered stratospheric flight up around 35,000 feet with supercharged engine and pressure suits, and he set some very, very fast records from coast to coast.
In March 1935, Post flew 2,000 miles from Burbank, California to Cleveland, Ohio in 7 hours and 19 minutes. For part of that flight, he reached a ground speed of 340 miles an hour, way beyond the top speed of the Vega. He was flying in the jet stream. Post died in a float plane crash in Alaska on August 15, 1935. This is the Hughes H1 Racer, designed by Howard Hughes to be the fastest land plane in the world. Its Pratt & Whitney twin Wasp Jr. engine could deliver up to 1,000 horsepower. The H1's clean design evolved through wind tunnel testing at the California Institute of Technology. The H1 was quite different from the Thompson and Bendix trophy race planes of the day. Its finish and attention to detail made many of the race planes look crude by comparison. Hughes began his record-breaking attempts in the H1 in 1935, but Steve Wittmann heard him striving for higher speed well before the H1 was built.
I heard a guy going around the course, just really tearing up the sky. It was, where the tip speeds get up there, where they yowl away, they really make a racket, and his was. And anyway, that happened 2-3 times. And finally I says, who the hell is that out there? Well, that's Howard Hughes.
Hughes attended air races and examined the designs of the early 30s race planes closely, but he never competed in a Thompson or Bendix trophy race. He was wealthy enough not to require sponsorship and decided that his path in the golden age of record-setting in aviation was best walked alone.
Well, I think he wanted to set some world records, and I figured that was probably the best chance he had. And I suppose he was like I was. He wanted to also develop something. And he was, of course, interested in, really the thing that I was is, but he had the finance to do it, is to get something that would go fast for transportation.
The Hughes H1 set a world speed record of 352 miles an hour in 1935. In 1937, it flew across the American continent in 7.5 hours. It was a highly successful and influential airplane, but some stories about its influence are myths.
They tell me the Japanese probably copied Howard Hughes's racer that he built back in 1935, and it certainly does look a little like the Zero. But he should have gotten into these races, but he never did, and I don't know really why. His racer would have probably cleaned us all.
In 1935, an extraordinary airplane created a great upset at the National Air Races in Cleveland. It didn't even look like a race plane, but looks can deceive. It was called Mr. Mulligan. It won the Bendix Trophy race from Los Angeles to Cleveland and then took off in the Thompson Trophy to challenge Roscoe Turner. It was a classic wolf in sheep's clothing, a comfortable four-place cabin plane with much less power than most of its competitors, and yet it qualified second fastest. On the last lap of the trophy race, Roscoe Turner's Waddell Williams was leading when his supercharger fell apart. Turner, blinded by oil, made an emergency landing, and Mr. Mulligan, piloted by Harold Newman, took the opportunity to go through and win. Steve Wittmann and Bonzo came in second, averaging 218 miles an hour. Third was Roger Don Ray in the Keith Ryder R1. In 1936, the world was changing. Within 5 years, developments from American air racing would be tested in battle. In 1936, Roscoe Turner's engine failed over New Mexico, and his Waddell Williams was destroyed. Immediately, he commissioned work on a new plane, the Turner Meteor. His strategy was simple. He would construct the best airframe possible and power it with the biggest engine he could get, a double-row Twin Wasp Senior, tuned to deliver well over 1,000 horsepower. It was typical of Roscoe Turner's approach. He knew the importance of showmanship and flair, and his opponents respected him for it.
Well, of course, you got Roscoe, and he was a showman, but that's how he could promote airplanes and engines for himself. See? And he was doing it all the time. He was working at it. You never saw a bigger set of wings on anybody than Roscoe to wear, you know. But he used it to advantage, and he had the looks and so forth to go with it. He's a really dashing hero, you know.
More than 5 miles a minute, and which is half as fast as sound and half as fast as a .45 bullet. And this is all necessary in the advancement and progress of civilization.
Roscoe Turner was probably the most flamboyant of them all. He, his pet lion and his mustache and his self-designed uniform, he made himself a captain, and then he decided that wasn't enough. He made himself a colonel, and not in anything, just a colonel. And he had really weird things, but he was a very good pilot. He was a fine pilot, and he was a very good speech maker. He made some excellent speeches. You wouldn't think it, but he was a real interesting man.
When Roscoe Turner's lion Gilmore grew too big to fly, he was donated to a zoo. When he died, he was stuffed and kept in Roscoe Turner's living room. His present home is the National Air and Space Museum's restoration facility. Throughout the 1930s, one of the most successful designers of race planes was Keith Ryder. This is the Ryder R6 8-ball, which made its debut at the 1938 National Air Races. Another Ryder design, the R4, was raced by Bill Schoenfeld as the Firecracker.
Bill Schoenfeld was quite wealthy. He was one of the few guys that had money. And he bought a new engine for this Firecracker and had a lot of special things done to the engine and the airplane.
In 1938, Bill Schoenfeld offered Tony LeVere the job of flying the Firecracker. It was just the chance LeVere had been waiting for.
This thing, you won't believe, I'd never dreamed of flying anything like it. This was a super airplane. Power, you won't believe it. It had 550 horsepower in this small airplane, no bigger than these little dinky ones you see today. And they tell me I was off the ground in about 4 or 5 seconds. And my God, it climbed like a homesick angel. At about a 260 indicated and still climbing, it got so windy and the turbulence in the cockpit, I just couldn't hardly stand it. And the wing was heavy anyway. One wing was heavy. It wanted to roll quite sharply one way, and I didn't think that would be smart to fly it too much out of trim. And I came down and landed, and gosh, it was easy to land.
Steve Wittmann's Bonzo had undergone quite a few changes since its second place in the 1935 Thompson Trophy. The wingspan had been shortened, and the horsepower in his old Curtiss D12 engine boosted by about 10%. He continued to get amazing results from an airplane and engine combination that had no right to be competitive. Favorite for the 1938 Thompson Trophy was Roscoe Turner in the Meteor. Steve Wittmann was there with Bonzo, but Tony LeVere damaged the Schoenfeld Firecracker on landing after winning the Grieve Race, a lead-up event. Roscoe Turner's main opposition was Earl Ortman in the Marco Bomberg Special, another Keith Ryder design. Archester failed to finish in the Goon. Throughout the race, Turner's Meteor struggled to defeat Earl Ortman. The Marco Bomberg Special was very competitive, but it ran out of oil on the 13th lap, leaving the way clear for Roscoe Turner to win his second Thompson Trophy. Steve Wittmann and Bonzo came in third, and the following year, when Turner won for the third time, he managed fifth place. Wittmann was convinced of the value of air racing in the 30s.
We actually were the fastest thing going. We were faster than the military, or should I say, faster than anything else. And to me, that was quite an accomplishment. Quite to be amongst that group. It was bringing the speed of aviation up to, well, bringing it up a notch.
Now, in the last race there in 1939, there were a couple of military airplanes in there. And my little racer was faster than those. The fastest military airplanes we had in this country was slower than my airplane. They were there. I went by them like they were tied to a post. And the things that we did, building these airplanes, encouraged other people to get involved in aviation. I know that happened. And I know the military must have gotten ideas, tricycle landing gears and retractable landing gears and high horsepower. We all had it.
Well, I think it really had a lot to do with the performance of the aircraft in World War II. Jimmy Doolittle, pushed for the higher octane fuel, which would develop more for racing, and then it turned out that by using that fuel, our airplanes, the Allied airplanes, had quite a performance edge over the others, the enemy airplanes, especially early in the war. And all that horsepower, the Merlin engine was developed as a result of racing engines, and all it had quite an impact on aviation development. And it really turned the whole world on to aviation, I think, a lot more than it would have otherwise.
From 1940 to 1945, there was no National Air Race meeting. In 1946, an attempt was made to revive the National Air Races, and a huge crowd gathered at Cleveland in the hope of recapturing some of the magic of the pre-war golden age. Many pre-war fans were there, a few years older and changed by the experience of war. High-standard aerobatics and flying displays excited the crowd, but somehow it was not the same. Airplanes that distinguished themselves in World War II demonstrated their specialties. A C-47 dropped paratroops. The major event of the National Air Races had always been the Thompson Trophy, and one familiar name was back to compete. Tony LeVere, now a test pilot with Lockheed, was flying not the Firecracker, but a red P-38 fighter. Among this assembly of high-speed machinery from the war, there was not one Golden Age racer of the 30s, no Wittmann Bonzo, no Marku Bomberg Special, no Turner Meteor. The Thompson Trophy was contested exclusively by World War II fighters. Jackie Cochran watched Tex Johnston win in a highly modified Bell P-39 era Cobra. Tex Johnston accepted the Thompson Trophy in the presence of three-time winner Roscoe Turner, now retired from air racing, and Jackie Cochran, who won the Bendix Trophy in 1938. It was an exciting meet, but in the years since 1939, one major change had occurred that made it impossible to revive air racing in its pre-war form. In 1939, the fastest airplanes in America were still the one-off, privately produced racing specials. Military airplanes had not been able to match their performance. Now, after 6 years of development accelerated by war, military airplanes had exhausted the speed potential of propellers. The jet engine had taken over, pushing on to new levels of speed undreamed of by the Golden Age racing pilots. A new age was beginning. However attractive the idea, the pre-war days of the racing specials and their intrepid pilots could never be recaptured. The Golden Age of air racing will be remembered as a great era in American aviation, an era that expanded the frontiers of flight.